Ma'am, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to economy. There's been a mistake.
Very well, Mr. Patterson. I'll move to economy class.
Ma'am, you can't return to this seat. We discussed this earlier.
Mr. Patterson, I'd like to see that documentation about the system's error after all.
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to economy. There's been a mistake with your booking. The words sliced through the hushed luxury of Flight 447's first-class cabin like a blade through silk, creating a tension so thick it seemed to vibrate in the recycled air. What Jerome Patterson, the nervous airline official delivering this fabricated ultimatum, didn't notice was that passenger Kai Thompson in seat 1C had been recording a TikTok video about flying first class for the first time when the confrontation began. His phone was still rolling, the red recording dot glowing like a digital witness to what was about to become the most explosive airline discrimination incident ever caught on camera. Dr. Zara Blackwood looked up from her leather seat, 2A window side, purchased with her own Black American Express Centurion card, at the uniformed man whose hands trembled as he delivered what every instinct told her was a carefully orchestrated lie. The cabin's warm lighting cast shadows across the faces of fellow passengers, and she could see the subtle shift in energy as people sensed they were witnessing something significant. Phone screens began glowing throughout the cabin like digital flowers blooming in real time, that modern reflex that transforms ordinary people into citizen journalists when injustice unfolds before their eyes. Kai Thompson, a 23-year-old travel influencer with 2.3 million TikTok followers, felt his pulse quicken as he recognized the gravity of what his camera was capturing. This wasn't just another airline inconvenience. This was systematic discrimination happening in real time, and he was getting every word, every gesture, every micro-expression that would later serve as irrefutable evidence of what truly transpired at 37,000 feet. What none of them knew, not Jerome, not Kai, not even Dr. Blackwood herself, was that this routine passenger displacement would ignite a viral firestorm that would reach over 200 million people within 48 hours, topple a business empire, send 2 men to federal prison, and forever change how airlines approach passenger rights in the age of smartphones and social media. If powerful stories, voices, and Black triumphs matter to you, subscribe to Bold Black Watch TV. Like, comment, and share so these stories travel further. Dr. Zara Blackwood had built her fortune on reading people, on understanding the subtle dynamics that revealed true intentions beneath polished surfaces. As Jerome Patterson stumbled through his obviously rehearsed explanation about booking errors and system malfunctions, she noticed something that would prove crucial in the hours to come. Nearly every passenger in first class was now holding a phone, and those red recording indicators were multiplying like digital fireflies in the dim cabin lighting. Sarah Martinez, a civil rights attorney in seat 3B traveling to Chicago for a discrimination case, had immediately switched her Instagram to live mode when she heard the word mistake applied to a Black woman's first-class reservation. Her legal instincts, honed by 15 years of fighting transportation discrimination cases, told her she was witnessing something that needed to be preserved for posterity. "Y'all," she whispered to her 47,000 followers, "I'm literally watching them try to kick a Black woman out of first class right now. The audacity is unreal." In seat 1C, Kai Thompson had quietly switched from his phone to professional camera equipment, the same setup he used for his high-production travel videos. His content creation instincts, developed through years of building viral content, told him this moment required more than casual documentation. He was capturing not just an incident, but what he sensed would become a cultural moment that would be analyzed, shared, and remembered long after Flight 447 touched down. The visual contrast was stark and damning. Dr. Blackwood sat with the composed dignity of someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations, while Jerome Patterson sweated profusely despite the cabin's comfortable temperature, his eyes darting between her face and his clipboard as if the fabricated booking error might materialize through sheer nervous energy. 3 rows behind Dr. Blackwood, Thaddeus Blackstone watched the scene unfold with barely concealed satisfaction, completely unaware that multiple cameras were capturing his smugness for posterity. At 58, Thaddeus had built a real estate empire worth over $400 million by believing that everything and everyone had a price. Yesterday evening's conversation with Jerome at the airport bar had cost him $15,000 in cash, but watching this uppity woman gather her belongings and surrender her seat felt worth every penny. His 4 European business partners, Dmitry Volkov from Moscow, Hans Mueller from Berlin, Philippe Dubois from Paris, and Elena Rossini from Rome, watched the interaction with varying degrees of discomfort, not yet understanding that their American host had orchestrated this humiliation through bribery and racist assumptions. They were partners in what Thaddeus called the deal of the century, a partnership with 4 European investors that could potentially double his net worth. What they didn't know was that their signatures would become worthless within the next 6 hours. Dr. Zara Blackwood had always possessed what her grandmother called quiet thunder, the kind of strength that didn't need to announce itself because it lived in every calculated movement, every measured word, and every decision that had transformed her from a girl who grew up in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood into one of the most powerful women in American aviation. At 42, she carried herself with the grace of someone who had learned early that dignity was not something others could grant or take away, it was something you owned completely. This particular Tuesday morning found her traveling from Los Angeles to Chicago, officially for what her assistant had scheduled as a business meeting. The reality was far more complex and infinitely more important than anyone on Flight 447 could have imagined. In her leather briefcase, tucked between financial projections and legal documents, lay the signed papers that would announce the completion of her acquisition of controlling interest in Skyline Airways, the very airline whose first-class cabin she now occupied. Tomorrow's board meeting would make it official, but today she was still just another passenger, albeit one with an unusual amount of influence over their flight experience. Jerome's fabricated explanation grew more desperate with each word, his voice rising slightly as he realized that Dr. Blackwood was not responding with the submissive acceptance he and Thaddeus had anticipated. "The computer system shows a conflict in seat assignments," he stammered, gesturing vaguely toward a tablet that showed no such thing. "We need to resolve this before takeoff, and unfortunately, the only solution is to move you to a premium economy seat." Kai Thompson's professional equipment was capturing the conversation in pristine audio quality, every stammer and hesitation preserved for analysis. His real-time commentary, whispered just loud enough for his microphone to pick up, provided context that would make the eventual viral videos even more compelling. The body language here is telling everything. Look at how he can't maintain eye contact. Look at how his hands are shaking. This is not a real booking error, this is discrimination in progress. Dr. Blackwood closed her laptop with deliberate care, her movements measured and dignified even as rage built behind her composed exterior. She had faced discrimination before, subtle and overt, in boardrooms and restaurants, in hotels and airports, but never with such crude transparency, and never while surrounded by digital witnesses documenting every moment for global consumption. "Mr. Patterson," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had negotiated billion-dollar mergers and hostile takeovers, "may I see the documentation for this supposed system error?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Jerome's face flushed crimson as he realized his prepared script had no provisions for supporting evidence. The cameras captured his visible panic as he stammered, The documentation is back at the gate and we're preparing for pushback. We need to handle this immediately." Sarah Martinez's legal commentary was being live-streamed to a growing audience. "As an attorney who handles discrimination cases, I can tell you this is textbook racial profiling. No documentation, pressure to comply immediately, targeting the only black woman in first class. This is exactly how these incidents unfold." What made the footage particularly damaging was the stark contrast in treatment. Other first-class passengers with complicated requests or minor issues were being handled with patient professionalism by other crew members, while Dr. Blackwood was being subjected to aggressive pressure to surrender her paid seat based on an error that couldn't be documented or explained. Dr. Blackwood studied Jerome's face for a long moment, reading the guilt written in every micro-expression, before making a decision that would be analyzed in business schools for decades to come. Rather than escalate the confrontation or demand to see a supervisor, she chose strategic compliance, gathering her belongings with the same measured precision she brought to every corporate maneuver. "Very well, Mr. Patterson. I'll move to economy class." Her dignified response was captured by multiple cameras, creating a visual record of grace under pressure that would later be contrasted with the celebratory reactions of those who had orchestrated her humiliation. As she stood and collected her briefcase, laptop bag, and small carry-on, Dr. Blackwood made brief but significant eye contact with Kai Thompson, whose camera had been documenting the entire interaction. Something in his subtle nod told her that whatever was happening was being preserved with professional quality, and that knowledge would prove crucial in the hours to come. The walk from first class to economy class became a symbolic journey captured from multiple angles, as passenger after passenger documented her dignified retreat while Thaddeus Blackstone's satisfaction grew more visible with each step. What none of them knew was that this apparent victory for discrimination and privilege was actually the opening move in a masterclass of strategic justice that would destroy reputations, end careers, and create legal precedents that would protect future travelers for generations. The plan had been elegantly simple and morally reprehensible. Thaddeus would claim there had been a booking error with one passenger's ticket, move that passenger to economy class, and he would graciously accept the upgraded seat for his business partner. The fact that the passenger in question was a black woman traveling alone made the scheme feel, to both men, like it would encounter minimal resistance. Jerome had spent 20 minutes that morning staring at Dr. Blackwood's reservation, trying to manufacture a plausible excuse for the error. Her ticket had been purchased with a Black American Express Centurion card, her frequent flyer status showed Diamond Elite level with over 2 million miles, and her contact information listed a corporate address that, when he Googled it, revealed a financial consulting firm with offices in 12 major cities. Nothing about her reservation suggested someone who could be easily displaced. But $15,000 was $15,000, and Jerome had convinced himself that one uncomfortable conversation was worth more than his annual salary increase. The Denver layover was supposed to be a routine 45-minute stop for refueling and passenger exchange, but it became the setting for the most damaging confession ever accidentally caught on camera in airline discrimination history. Kai Thompson, recognizing that this story was far from over, had followed the key players to the first-class lounge, his professional instincts telling him that Thaddeus Blackstone's type of entitled arrogance rarely stayed hidden for long. Dr. Blackwood, armed with her Diamond Elite status that no amount of seat reassignment could revoke, had settled into a quiet corner booth of the spacious lounge with her laptop and phone. The 2 hours during the flight had been incredibly productive. 17 phone calls to her executive team, 43 emails setting corporate restructuring in motion, and a series of text messages that would soon transform the airline industry. What she hadn't expected was that her tormentors would provide additional evidence of their crimes through their own arrogant celebration. Kai positioned himself strategically across the lounge with his equipment, continuing what he was now calling the most insane airline discrimination story ever caught on camera. His professional microphones, the same setup he used for his high-production travel documentaries, could pick up clear conversation from across the room, a capability that would prove devastating for Thaddeus and his business empire. The confession began with the kind of racist celebration that prosecutors dream of presenting to federal juries. Thaddeus, holding court at a high-top table near the bar, was regaling his European business partners with the story of his cleverness in displacing Dr. Blackwood, completely unaware that his every word was being captured in pristine audio quality by equipment designed for professional content creation. "You should have seen her face when they told her about the booking error," Thaddeus laughed, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet lounge. "I swear these people never question authority. They just accept whatever they're told and shuffle along quietly. $15,000 to that spineless airline manager and problem solved." Philips Dubois, the French business partner, leaned forward with uncomfortable curiosity. "But Thaddeus, surely this is not ethical? To displace a paying passenger through deception?" Thaddeus's response was captured with such clarity that prosecutors would later play it in federal court without any audio enhancement. "Ethics? My friend, ethics are a luxury for people who can't afford to get what they need. That woman was sitting in first class like she owned the place, probably got her seat through some diversity program or charity upgrade. I simply restored the natural order of things." Kai Thompson's real-time social media updates were creating a digital firestorm as he live-tweeted the confession. Update: Guy who bribed airline staff to kick black woman from first class is now bragging about it in the airport lounge. Says he paid $15,000, calls her, "these people," talks about natural order. "I'm recording everything." Hashtag Flight 447 Hashtag Racist Exposed. Elena Rossini, the Italian partner, looked visibly uncomfortable as she listened to Thaddeus reduce a human being to a racist stereotype. "And you feel no remorse for this deception? For humiliating someone based on assumptions about their worth? Remorse?" Thaddeus's laugh was harsh and grating, every note preserved in high-definition audio that would later be analyzed by voice recognition experts as evidence of his mental state during the confession. For what? For teaching someone a valuable lesson about their place in the world? "She'll forget all about this by tomorrow, but I'll remember the look on her face forever." Sometimes you have to remind people that money talks louder than whatever sob story they're carrying around. Every story here is bold. Every voice matters. If Bold Black Watch TV moved you, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and help us amplify black stories about justice that deserve to be heard. Dr. Blackwood, who had been quietly working 20 feet away, heard every word of this racist celebration. The professional microphones that were capturing Thaddeus's confession for Kai's content were sensitive enough that she could follow the entire conversation, and what she heard transformed her strategic thinking from gradual corporate reform to immediate, devastating justice. She thought about her grandmother, who had cleaned offices for 40 years to pay for her granddaughter's education. She thought about her mother, who had worked double shifts as a nurse to afford Dr. Blackwood's college expenses. She thought about every racist assumption, every condescending comment, every time someone had tried to make her feel small because of her race or her gender or her background. And then she thought about tomorrow's board meeting, about the papers in her briefcase, and about the fact that Thaddeus Blackstone had just humiliated the majority shareholder of the very airline he was traveling on. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Dr. Blackwood had been 28 years old when she'd first noticed the patterns in airline operations. The inefficiencies, the customer service failures, the systematic discrimination that seemed baked into every level of the industry. She'd been traveling for a consulting contract, working to help a struggling manufacturing company restructure their operations, when she'd witnessed a gate agent refuse to allow an elderly black man to board his flight despite having a valid ticket. The agent had claimed there was no record of his reservation, even though the man had his confirmation number and boarding pass. That incident had planted a seed that grew over the next 14 years into a comprehensive plan to transform the airline industry from within. Dr. Blackwood had spent those years building her consulting empire, accumulating capital, and quietly studying every aspect of airline operations. She'd learned about route optimization, fleet management, regulatory compliance, and most importantly, the corporate structures that allowed discrimination to flourish unchecked. Her acquisition of Skyline Airways had been 3 years in the making, involving a complex web of subsidiary companies, private equity partnerships, and strategic investments that had allowed her to accumulate shares without triggering the public disclosure requirements that would have revealed her identity. Tomorrow's board meeting would announce that Dr. Zara Blackwood now controlled 63% of Skyline Airways, making her not just the majority shareholder, but the most powerful person in the company's hierarchy. The viral explosion was already beginning. Kai's preview clips from the original incident had accumulated over 3 million views during the flight, with celebrities, civil rights organizations, and major news accounts amplifying the story across every platform. The hashtags #Flight447, #SkylineShame, and #AirlineDiscrimination were trending nationally, and Kai's live updates from the lounge were adding rocket fuel to an already explosive story. Sarah Martinez, who had also made her way to the lounge, was providing legal commentary that was being shared by attorneys and activists across the country. "Y'all, this man just confessed to federal civil rights violations while being recorded. He admitted to bribery, conspiracy, and racially motivated discrimination. This is going to be Exhibit A in criminal court." When Flight 447 resumed boarding after the Denver layover, the entire first-class cabin had been transformed into what Sarah Martinez described as a mobile courtroom with citizen journalists serving as the jury. Every passenger was equipped with recording devices, social media accounts, and the growing awareness that they were witnessing something historic unfold in real time. Dr. Blackwood's return to Seat 2A, her original first-class assignment, was captured by no fewer than 8 different cameras as she walked calmly down the aisle and settled into her rightful place with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested she knew something that others didn't. Her movements were deliberate and dignified, her expression serene, and her entire demeanor radiated the kind of controlled power that made experienced business executives instinctively straighten their posture. Jerome Patterson, who had spent the layover hoping to avoid any further interaction with the woman he'd displaced through fraud, felt his stomach drop when he saw her return to first class. His approach to her seat was captured from multiple angles as passengers positioned their phones to document what everyone sensed would be a significant confrontation. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," Jerome began, his voice already shaky as he realized that the situation was far more complex than he and Thaddeus had anticipated. "We discussed this earlier. Your seat assignment was changed due to the system's error, and you need to return to your assigned seat in economy class." Kai Thompson's commentary, whispered just loud enough for his professional microphones to capture, provided context that would make his eventual documentary even more powerful. "She's back in first class, and her energy is completely different now. Something changed during that layover. Look at her posture, look at her expression. This woman knows something that's about to change everything." Dr. Blackwood looked up from her laptop, the same laptop that contained signed acquisition documents making her the majority owner of Skyline Airways, with the kind of patient attention that had made Fortune 500 CEOs reconsider their negotiating positions. "Mr. Patterson, I've had some time to think about our earlier conversation, and I've decided that I'd like to see that documentation about the system's error after all. The request, delivered with calm authority and captured in high-definition video from multiple angles, created visible panic in Jerome's eyes as he realized that his fabricated excuse was about to be thoroughly examined by someone who clearly possessed both the knowledge and the confidence to challenge his lies. "I explained that the documentation is at the gate," Jerome stammered, his increasing desperation captured by cameras that would preserve his discomfort for millions of viewers. "Yes, I remember," Dr. Blackwood replied with the kind of precise articulation that comes from years of cross-examining hostile witnesses in boardroom negotiations. "But we're currently at a gate in Denver, and I'm sure you can access whatever systems you need to verify the alleged error in my reservation. Unless, of course, no such error exists." The challenge hung in the air like a sword, and Jerome's visible panic was captured by multiple cameras as he realized that his prepared excuses were crumbling under the weight of logical scrutiny. Behind them, Thaddeus Blackstone watched the exchange with growing alarm, finally understanding that the woman he had paid to humiliate was far more formidable than he had assumed. Sarah Martinez's live legal commentary was reaching an audience of over 100,000 viewers as she analyzed the confrontation in real time. "She's systematically dismantling his lies and he's got nowhere to go. Watch his body language, that's the look of someone who knows they're caught in a federal crime." Jerome, trapped between the woman who clearly knew more than she was revealing and the man who had bribed him to orchestrate this discrimination, made the kind of desperate decision that would later be studied in crisis management courses as an example of how to transform a bad situation into a catastrophic one. He called airport security. "We have a disruptive passenger in first class who is refusing to comply with crew instructions," Jerome told the security dispatcher, his conversation captured by multiple recording devices. "She's been asked to move to her assigned seat and is being confrontational. I need assistance in removing her from the aircraft." The moment Jerome made this call, every phone in first class began recording simultaneously, as passengers understood that they were about to witness either a massive injustice or a spectacular reversal of fortune. Dr. Blackwood listened to his false report with the kind of detached interest she typically reserved for watching competitors make catastrophic strategic errors. Kai Thompson's live commentary captured the building tension. "Y'all, this is about to get real. Security is coming, but I don't think they're prepared for what they're walking into. This woman has something up her sleeve and I think we're about to find out what it is." When Officer Kevin Burke arrived at Seat 2A 20 minutes later, he was walking into the most thoroughly documented airport security incident in modern history. 15 passengers had their phones recording, 3 people were live-streaming to audiences totaling over 200,000 viewers, and Kai Thompson's professional equipment was capturing broadcast-quality footage that would later be licensed by major news networks around the world. Officer Burke, a 15-year veteran of airport security accustomed to handling everything from unruly passengers to celebrity meltdowns, immediately sensed that this situation was unlike anything in his experience. The passenger he'd been called to remove was sitting calmly with a laptop and legal documents, surrounded by other first-class passengers who were recording every moment with the intensity of war correspondents documenting history. "Ma'am, I understand there's been an issue with your seating assignment," Burke began, his professional demeanor captured by cameras that would later show the exact moment when assumptions about power and authority began to crumble. "I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and come with me." Dr. Blackwood closed her laptop and turned to face Officer Burke with the kind of respectful attention that immediately distinguished her from the typical problem passengers he usually encountered. The cameras captured every nuance of her response, from her composed posture to her measured tone, creating a visual record that would later serve as evidence of her cooperation and dignity throughout the encounter. "Officer Burke," she said, reading his name tag with the kind of attention to detail that had made her one of the most successful deal-makers in corporate America, "I appreciate your position in this matter, but I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about the nature of this situation." Burke consulted his notes, unaware that his every word was being recorded by equipment sophisticated enough to be used as evidence in federal court. "Ma'am, airline personnel have reported that you're refusing to comply with crew instructions regarding your seat assignment. That constitutes interference with flight crew duties, which is a federal offense. Bold Black Watch TV is more than a channel, it's a community. Subscribe, like this video, and join us as we celebrate justice, truth, culture, and powerful Black narratives." "I see," Dr. Blackwood replied, her tone remaining perfectly neutral even as she prepared to deliver what would become one of the most devastating reveals in viral video history. "Officer Burke, may I ask what specific crew instruction I've refused to comply with?" Burke referenced his notes again, completely unaware that he was about to become a supporting character in a story that would reach hundreds of millions of people. You were instructed to move from first class to economy class due to a booking error, and you've returned to first class in violation of that instruction. And have you seen documentation of this alleged booking error? The question was simple, direct, and captured by multiple cameras as it created visible uncertainty in Burke's expression. In all his years of handling passenger disputes, no one had ever asked him to examine the underlying documentation of airline policies. "Ma'am, that's not typically within my area of expertise. Airline personnel handle booking issues." "Of course they do," Dr. Blackwood agreed, her voice taking on the tone she typically used when explaining complex negotiations to junior associates. "Officer Burke, I'm going to make a request that might seem unusual, but I believe it will resolve this situation quickly and professionally." Burke found himself genuinely curious about what this remarkably composed woman was about to propose, completely unaware that her next words would transform him from an authority figure into a witness to corporate justice. "I'd like you to call your supervisor and ask them to contact Skyline Airways corporate headquarters. Specifically, I'd like them to speak with someone from the board of directors or executive management team about this incident." The request was so unexpected, delivered with such quiet confidence, that Burke found himself agreeing before he fully understood what he was committing to. The cameras captured his growing confusion as he realized that typical passenger disputes don't involve requests for contact with airline corporate headquarters. What happened next was captured by multiple cameras and would later be described in airport security training manuals as the most spectacular reversal of authority in the history of commercial aviation dispute resolution. Officer Burke, following protocol that he didn't quite understand but that seemed reasonable given the unusual circumstances, called his supervisor, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. Rodriguez, a 22-year veteran who had handled everything from terrorist threats to international incidents, was initially skeptical about Burke's request to contact airline corporate headquarters over a seating dispute. But something in Burke's description of the passenger's extraordinary composure and specific requests convinced her that this situation warranted investigation. The call to Skyline Airways corporate headquarters, placed at 3:47 p.m. Mountain Time, reached the desk of Jonathan Myers, Executive Vice President of Operations, who was working late in his Chicago office preparing for tomorrow's historic board meeting. Myers, who had spent 6 months working directly with the mysterious new majority shareholder on transition planning, nearly choked on his coffee when Rodriguez identified the passenger in question. "Did you say Dr. Zara Blackwood?" Myers asked, his voice carrying a note of panic that Rodriguez couldn't interpret but that would later be analyzed by audio experts as evidence of his immediate recognition of the gravity of the situation. Kai Thompson's equipment captured Burke's side of the conversation as Rodriguez relayed information back to him, documenting the exact moment when airport security realized they had walked into a corporate earthquake rather than a routine passenger dispute. "Ma'am," Burke said, approaching Dr. Blackwood with newfound uncertainty, "I've just spoken with my supervisor who contacted Skyline Airways corporate headquarters. There appears to be some confusion about your status with the airline." Dr. Blackwood smiled for the first time since boarding Flight 447, an expression of quiet satisfaction that was captured by multiple cameras and would later become iconic in discussions of justice served. "Officer Burke, there's no confusion about my status. Would you mind asking Mr. Patterson to join us? I believe it's time we had a complete and honest conversation about the events of this afternoon." Jerome Patterson's approach to Seat 2A was captured from multiple angles, documenting his visible terror as he realized that whatever protection he had expected from Thaddeus Blackstone's money and influence was evaporating in real time. The sweat beading on his forehead, his shaking hands, and his inability to maintain eye contact were all preserved in high-definition video that would later serve as evidence of his consciousness of guilt. "Mr. Patterson," Dr. Blackwood began, her voice carrying the kind of controlled authority that had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, "I think it's time you explain to Officer Burke exactly how my booking error came to light." Jerome's mouth opened and closed several times, his panic captured by cameras that would preserve his discomfort for millions of viewers, before any sound emerged. The silence stretched long enough for passengers throughout the cabin to lean forward in anticipation, sensing that they were about to witness the climax of an extraordinary story. The system showed." Jerome stammered, his attempted explanation dissolving into incoherent fragments as he realized that his fabricated story could no longer withstand scrutiny. "Mr. Patterson," Dr. Blackwood continued with relentless precision, "would you prefer to tell Officer Burke about your conversation yesterday evening with Mr. Blackstone, or shall I explain how $15,000 changed hands in exchange for fabricating a booking error that would force me out of my paid seat?" The gasp that arose from surrounding passengers was audible throughout the cabin, but it was nothing compared to the strangled sound that came from Thaddeus Blackstone himself, a noise captured by multiple microphones as the sound of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. Jerome's confession came in a rush of words and tears captured by cameras positioned throughout the cabin, creating a visual record that would later be used as primary evidence in federal criminal proceedings. He described the airport bar meeting, the envelope of cash, the pressure he felt to comply with demands from someone who seemed powerful and connected. He admitted that no booking error had ever existed, that Dr. Blackwood's reservation was perfect and legitimate, and that he had participated in a conspiracy to humiliate and displace her based solely on Thaddeus Blackstone's racist assumptions and financial influence. "Mr. Blackstone," Burke called, turning toward the man who had been trying to make himself invisible in seat 5A, "I need you to step into the aisle, please." Thaddeus rose on unsteady legs, his progression through several shades of red before settling into ashy gray captured by cameras that documented his visible mental and physical collapse. His European business partners watched in fascinated horror as their American host was escorted toward the front of the plane, their $2 billion partnership dissolving before their eyes while being recorded for posterity. "Dr. Blackwood," Burke said, turning back to the woman who had just revealed the conspiracy, "I need to ask about your relationship with Skyline Airways." Dr. Blackwood stood gracefully, retrieving her briefcase and opening it to reveal the signed documents that would be announced at tomorrow's board meeting. "Officer Burke, as of tomorrow morning, I will be officially announced as the majority shareholder of Skyline Airways. I own 63% of this airline, which makes me not just a passenger, but the ultimate authority over how passengers are treated on this aircraft." The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the sound of phones recording as passengers realized they were witnessing one of the greatest justice reveals in modern history. The visual of Dr. Blackwood calmly explaining her ownership of the very airline that had tried to humiliate her was captured from multiple angles, creating footage that would be analyzed, shared, and celebrated for years to come. What did this story mean to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to Bold Black Watch TV for more powerful black stories. The immediate aftermath of Dr. Blackwood's revelation unfolded with the swift precision of a military operation. Within 30 minutes of her identity becoming known, Flight 447 had been met by a team of corporate executives, federal investigators, and legal representatives who transformed the aircraft into an impromptu crime scene investigation unit. Jerome Patterson was escorted off the plane in handcuffs, charged with accepting bribes, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, and federal aviation fraud. His 15-year career with Skyline Airways ended with the kind of spectacular public disgrace that would make him unemployable in the transportation industry for the rest of his life. Within 30 minutes of Dr. Blackwood revealing her identity as Skyline Airways' majority owner, the footage from Flight 447 was spreading across the internet at a velocity that social media analysts would later describe as unprecedented in viral justice history. Kai Thompson's professionally produced videos, Sarah Martinez's legal commentary, and the multiple passenger recordings had created a perfect storm of documentation that made denial impossible and justice inevitable. The arrest of Jerome Patterson was captured by 8 different cameras as airport security led him away in handcuffs, charged with accepting bribes, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, and federal aviation fraud. His 15-year career with Skyline Airways ended with the kind of spectacular public disgrace that was being live-streamed to audiences across 6 continents. Thaddeus Blackstone's arrest was even more dramatic, captured from multiple angles as his European business partners watched their American host face federal charges for bribery, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and interference with commercial aviation operations. The look of absolute terror on his face as he realized that his racist assumptions had destroyed everything he'd built was preserved in 4K resolution and shared millions of times across every social media platform. Kai Thompson's real-time documentary had accumulated over 15 million views before the plane even reached its gate in Chicago. His commentary during the arrest was quoted by major news outlets. "Y'all, we just witnessed the greatest justice reveal in modern history. Rich white man pays to kick black woman out of first class, not knowing she literally owns the airline. The irony is so perfect it feels like divine intervention." The international media response was immediate and overwhelming. CNN, BBC, NBC, ABC, and news organizations from over 40 countries picked up the story within hours. But unlike typical news coverage that relies on second-hand accounts and limited footage, they had access to hours of high-quality video documenting every aspect of the incident from multiple perspectives. The video evidence was so comprehensive and damning that Thaddeus Blackstone's legal team advised him to accept a plea bargain rather than face trial, with footage of his racist confession playing for a federal jury. His conviction on federal civil rights charges resulted in 18 months in federal prison, forfeiture of assets to pay legal settlements, and the complete destruction of his business empire. His European business partners, having witnessed his character through their own eyes and cameras, terminated their partnership agreements before their plane landed in Chicago. Philippe Dubois was quoted in Le Monde as saying, "We cannot associate our brands with someone who celebrates the humiliation of others based on their race." The video evidence shows a man whose values are incompatible with civilized business. The cultural impact was immediate and global. Hashtag Flight 447, hashtag Skyline Justice, and hashtag Airline Owner became worldwide trending topics, with the story being shared, analyzed, and celebrated across dozens of languages and cultures. The footage was subtitled in over 30 languages within 48 hours, as international audiences connected with the universal themes of dignity, justice, and the dangers of racist assumptions. Every story here is bold. Every voice matters. If Bold Black Watch TV moved you, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and help us amplify Black stories about justice that deserve to be heard. The viral footage from Flight 447 created ripple effects throughout the airline industry that were documented and analyzed in real time across social media platforms. Dr. Blackwood leveraged the global attention to implement the most comprehensive passenger rights reforms in aviation history, with every policy change being shared and celebrated by the same digital community that had witnessed the original discrimination. The $30 million lawsuit that Dr. Blackwood filed against her own airline, technically suing herself to make a point about corporate accountability, became the largest discrimination settlement in aviation history. The entire settlement was donated to a foundation she established for combating discrimination in transportation industries, with the donation ceremony live-streamed to an audience of over 5 million viewers. Kai Thompson's complete documentary, released 3 months after the incident, became the most-watched justice content in Internet history, accumulating over 100 million views across all platforms. His footage had been used as primary evidence in federal criminal proceedings, cited in congressional hearings, and incorporated into corporate training programs as an example of how discrimination unfolds and how justice can be achieved in the digital age. The Dignity Protocol that Dr. Blackwood implemented at Skyline Airways was documented through social media as other airlines began adopting similar policies. The protocol required that no passenger could be moved from their paid seat without written documentation of specific operational necessity, approval from corporate headquarters, and compensation equal to 10 times their ticket price. Any employee found accepting bribes or fabricating booking errors would face immediate termination and criminal prosecution. Sarah Martinez, whose legal commentary had reached millions during the live streams, used her platform to launch a non-profit organization dedicated to providing legal representation for transportation discrimination cases. Her foundation, funded partly by donations from people who had watched the Flight 447 footage, had successfully prosecuted over 200 discrimination cases within its first year of operation. The technical quality of the video documentation had set new standards for citizen journalism and viral justice content. Law enforcement agencies began training officers to recognize that they were likely being filmed during any public confrontation, while airlines and other service industries implemented new policies acknowledging that discrimination incidents would inevitably be captured and shared globally. The cultural impact was measured through social media analytics that showed fundamental shifts in how people documented and responded to discrimination. The phrase Flight 447 moment entered popular vocabulary as shorthand for justice served through digital documentation, and bystander recording of potential discrimination incidents increased by over 300% in transportation settings. Dr. Blackwood often spoke about the importance of the digital witnesses in her story. Without those cameras, without those brave passengers who chose to document rather than look away, this would have been my word against theirs. The video evidence didn't just prove what happened, it made sure that what happened could never be denied, dismissed, or minimized. 2 years after the incident, Dr. Blackwood testified before Congress about discrimination in transportation industries, with her testimony being live-streamed to audiences around the world. The hearing room was packed with people who had followed her story from the beginning, many of whom had shared their own discrimination experiences using hashtags inspired by her case. Chairman Peterson, she said, addressing the committee while millions watched online, 2 years ago, I was subjected to discrimination on my own airline because 2 men assumed that my race made me powerless. They were wrong about my power, but they were absolutely right about the discrimination. What happened to me happens to countless others every single day. The only difference is that today those incidents are being documented, shared, and addressed through the power of digital witnessing. The Flight 447 footage had been viewed over 500 million times across all platforms, translated into dozens of languages, and used in civil rights training programs around the world. It had become more than a viral video. It had become a cultural touchstone that demonstrated how technology could expose injustice and deliver consequences in real time. Dr. Blackwood's story had inspired thousands of people to document discrimination when they witnessed it, leading to accountability in cases that previously would have been dismissed as he said, she said disputes. The footage from Flight 447 had proven that in the age of smartphones and social media, discrimination couldn't hide in plain sight anymore. Skyline Airways had become the most profitable airline in the country while maintaining the highest customer satisfaction ratings, proving that treating passengers with dignity was not just morally correct but financially advantageous. Dr. Blackwood had leveraged her success to acquire 2 more airlines, spreading the dignity protocol across a network that carried over 30 million passengers per year. The Thaddeus Blackstone story had become a cautionary tale told in business schools and corporate training programs about the dangers of assumption, prejudice, and the abuse of power. His name had become synonymous with the kind of entitled racism that could destroy careers, companies, and lives when exposed to the light of public scrutiny and digital documentation. The final legacy of Flight 447 was measured not just in views and shares, but in lives changed and systems reformed. Other airlines began implementing their own versions of the dignity protocol, not out of moral conviction but out of fear that their own hidden biases might be exposed by someone with the power to destroy their operations. The Federal Aviation Administration began requiring annual discrimination training for all airline employees, and Congress held hearings on passenger rights that resulted in the strongest civil rights protections in aviation history. Perhaps most importantly, the Flight 447 videos had demonstrated the power of bystander documentation in fighting discrimination. The fact that multiple passengers had chosen to record and share the incident rather than simply witnessing in silence had transformed a private humiliation into a public reckoning and a permanent victory for justice. Dr. Blackwood often ended her speeches with the same message that had been captured on camera during that historic flight. What happened on Flight 447 was not unique because I own the airline. It was unique because the entire incident was documented by digital witnesses who chose to preserve evidence rather than look away. In the age of smartphones and social media, discrimination exposed is discrimination defeated. The story of Flight 447 had become legendary not just because of its perfect irony, the discrimination victim owning the discriminating company, but because it had been captured with such thoroughness that denial was impossible and justice was inevitable. In an age where everything was documented, shared, and preserved, it served as both warning and promise. Justice might be delayed, but it was increasingly difficult to deny when caught on camera and witnessed by millions. The viral footage had created a permanent record of justice served, a digital monument to the principle that discrimination exposed is discrimination defeated. And in an age where everything was documented, shared, and preserved, the story of Flight 447 served as both warning and promise. Justice might be delayed, but in the age of smartphones and social media, it was increasingly difficult to deny. The complete Flight 447 video series remains one of the most powerful examples of viral justice in digital history, viewed over 500 million times globally and serving as permanent proof that in the smartphone age, discrimination caught on camera becomes justice delivered in real time. If this story moved you, share it, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that get caught on camera and refuse to be forgotten.